Good day to all of you. I'm delighted to moderate this session under ABA's webinar series, Connecting and Exploring Opportunities with ABA. So without much ado, can I very quickly introduce our speaker today? Mr. Sunil K.C. is an MBA and a science graduate in statistics and physics. He has been with Standard Chartered Bank, just like I have, for 16 years in international trade, transaction banking, control and treasury, and head of global markets. In 2010, he took over as the DGM at NMB Bank in Nepal, where he was instrumental in 5 mergers with financial institutions and a local development bank. He was subsequently appointed Deputy CEO and CEO in 2017, positioning NMB as one of the top quartile banks in Nepal. NMB was awarded the best bank in Nepal for 4 years in 2017, 2018, 2020 and 21, and the best bank in Asia by the Financial Times London, which is a prestigious magazine, recognizing its focus on governance, sustainability, and digital. So I will then hand you over to Sunil to take from here to make the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dilshan. Thank you very much for a nice intro. And first of all, I would like to thank ABA for this opportunity on behalf of Nepal Bankers Association. Nepal Bankers Association is the umbrella organization for first-class banks in Nepal. And we control about more than 90% of total banking business in Nepal as an institution. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here today. Thank you very much. And today being the International Women's Day, let me begin by wishing Happy Women's Day for all our women audience here today, with respect and appreciation for their contribution for banking industry. So let me begin by giving an overview of what Nepal is. Nepal, we are located in South Asia between India and China with 29 million population, 29.1 million to be very precise, with male to female ratio 96%, and our currency is pegged with India. Nepal uniquely positioned, strategically positioned between 2 largest top 5 economies in the world, China and India. With this, we are land linked with 1/3 of population, because China's and India's population comprises of 1/3 of world's population. That much success we have as a country, and that's the privilege we have. And at the same time, we have a huge potential in terms of renewable energy, which is one of the key demand at this point in time. And we have potential capacity of about producing more than 40,000 megawatt of hydropower, which is clean energy, along with other solar and other biomass renewable energy, alternative energies. We are a very diversified country with strategic assets like top mountains, Mount Everest, which is the highest peak in the world. We have, out of 14 peaks, we have 8 of them are more than 8,000 meters. So these are, along with our heritage sites and heritage places, we are a very culturally diversified country in the South Asia. And at the same time, from the environment perspective, our 44% of our land under forest cover. And we are still committed to grow that more to protect the environment and to support the overall climate risk mitigation in the globally. So we are the inspiring country to become the middle income country by 2030. And at the same time, we are one of the young country with a young population with median age of just 25. So 65% of our populations are young, active population and youth. And literacy rate is about 66%. And the finances inclusion is slightly above 60%, almost 65% financial inclusion is there. This is briefly about Nepal. And next slide, Abby, please. So in terms of macroeconomic situation, we are a small economy with about $40 billion GDP size, with nominal GDP per capita GDP of 1,381, less than 1,400. And last year's GDP growth was about 6%, slightly less than 6%, 5.84 to be very precise. And we are ranked as, in terms of doing business index, we are ranked as the 94th country out of 180 countries, and one of the third most favorable business climate in South Asia. We are also facing the challenges which we've all over the places we have seen in the last few months post-COVID situation. In terms of we are managing relatively better in terms of our forex reserves, which is about slightly over 10 billion, which covers about 10 months of total imports of the country. And at the same time, we are running with a positive balance of payment. And we are one of the remittance-led economy, and half of our majority of our trade deficit or trade gaps are being fulfilled by the remittance inflow to the migrant workers, remittance inflow into the country. This year, this fiscal year, we expect about almost $9 to $10 billion of remittance coming into the country. And inflation, we have relatively managed well at 7.26, that's a CPI, when most of the countries are now struggling for high interest rate, high inflation. With the timely intervention from the central bank and the government, we have managed to maintain this forex reserve, current account deficit, and inflation at relatively at the controlled level. Next slide, please. I just want to show you basically how the last 50 years, how Nepal as a country have performed in terms of our economic growth. We've divided this into the 4 parts. Basically, we had this absolute monarchy in Nepal for 250 years. And the last 15 years of that, if you look at from 1974, 75 to 1990, this 15 years, if you see the overall average growth was 4%, and banking balance sheet growth was hovering around 20% or slightly over than that. And in 1990, there's some changes in the system, like from the absolute monarchy, we moved to the constitutional monarchy with restoration of multi-party democracy in the country. And during that period, the country has really achieved very good growth and progress, and most of these reform policies and all liberalization policies were introduced that time. If you look at the growth in that 5 years period when we had this multi-party democracy system started, in that 5 years, we see the better growth in terms of GDP growth at more than 5%, and at the same time, balance sheet deposits and lending growth of the banking system around 30% for the lending, and around 20%, 22% for the deposits mobilization. That is one of the best period, if you see, in the last 45 years in terms of the setting up the base for the economic growth during that period. And unfortunately, after 5 good years in the history, in year 95, 96, the Maoist insurgency has started in the country for 10 years, almost 10 years. And during that period, overall, the business environment was impacted, and the growth has gone down, and at the same time, the banking system's growth has also curtailed. During that period, if you see, there is almost a negative growth in GDP in one of the years, and during that period, the outflow of migrant workers started. People seeking the job because of the security reason, because of there's no much opportunities there. People started migrating from the country to Gulf countries like Malaysia, Korea, and other parts for seeking the job for them. So that was one of the worst period, I would say, for the country's this economic growth path. And again, after that, in 2007, 2008, this Maoist insurgency ends and started for the formation of new constitution. And that took almost 7-8 years. During that period, also political instability was there. Though this insurgency period was ended, but still there are a lot of political instability, and so many new governments were formed. And during that period, despite that, because we had a very sluggish growth in that Maoist period, somehow growth rate has picked up, and banking also performed relatively better than that. And in 2015-16, 7 years back, Nepal promulgated the new constitution with federal structure, with decentralizing economic power, political powers into different levels, federal government, state government, and the local level governments. So during that period, we had a two-third majority government ruling the country, and for the first 3 years of that period, Nepal really achieved very good growth in terms of GDP growth, over 6% in the 3 consecutive years, despite the fact that in 2015, Nepal had a massive earthquake, losing more than 10,000 lives, and immediately after that, we had a blockade in southern part of the country for imports and all these things. Despite that, we had achieved we really bounced back and really achieved a good growth. But that was continuing. But unfortunately, again, 2020, 21, the COVID came in. That's where we see this negative growth in the year 1920. That's our fiscal year, especially in 2020. And again, after that, we really bounced back in the V shape. So this is the in a nutshell how we have performed the last 50 years as economy, as a country. But if you look at the thing, being a small GDP country, the growth rate over the period is, if you look at the average growth, is very sluggish, hovering around 4%. So that means we still have a lot of potential in terms of delivering better performance going ahead. Overall, I would say in different part of the thing, we've been hit by so many things, but we have really shown, especially the banking industry in Nepal, really shown the resilience to come back every time when you see all these things. If you look at the last 7 years period, from 2015, as I said, from the massive earthquake to COVID, and after that, when we're trying to revive from there, and there's this global scenario like geopolitical issues, Russian invasion to Ukraine, and all these have again impacted us in terms of our economic performance. Next slide, Abby. So as I mentioned earlier, during the Maoist insurgency period, most of young Nepalese people, they've started migrating to different countries where they have opportunity for job, and they started working there, and they started sending the money back into the country. And if you see from 2009, 10, 11, there's the green line, which is green line, which is represents remittances that has started picking up. So money coming into the country through these migrant workers is really supporting the country's economy. And now it has become one of the major contributor for overall foreign currency reserve of the country. If you see that, that's really growing over the last period, and we expect $9 to $10 billion remittance coming into the country, particularly this year, 2022-23 in Nepal. At the same time, if you look at the import figure, that's also rising sharply over the last 10 years period. Especially this represents high consumption, or whatever consumptions being done within the country are being fulfilled, or are being managed through the import from the different part of the country. But if you look at the export graph, which is not very flat kind of graph, so there's not much increase over the last 10 years. So there is a structural issue here, like in Nepal, that there's a huge trade deficit in terms of import and export. That what we export and what we in turn import and remit out of the money. So majority of that part is being covered by or being managed through the remittances we are receiving, apart from the tourism income. So this represents how Nepal's overall economy is being run and how it's working. This 10 billion represents about 25% of our total GDP size, which is quite a large size to cover with. So next slide. So this is, I'm just trying to show like how Nepal is managing the deficit and especially in the terms of fiscal deficit side. So still, if you look at the Nepal's this foreign currency debt, which is external debt done by the government in the different years. If you look at the years when Maoist insurgency was there, and that period, the debt size as a percentage of GDP, debt size was a bit high, but now it's around last year's data is around 21% of total external debt is, our total external debt is about 21% of total GDP. If you compare that with other South Asian countries and other countries, I think we still have a lot of room for in this front in terms of external commercial borrowing or external debt at the sovereign debt. So that's where I think there's an opportunity for foreign investor or foreign strategic investor in Nepal to come in and contribute for that. And we see that we could see there's a business opportunities lying there. So it's in one point in time back in late 90s, it was on a very higher side in terms of number, in terms of as a percentage of GDP, though if you look at the absolute numbers, not great, not big. At the same time now, it has come under control and slightly moving ahead in the last few years. So we expect these numbers to grow further. But still, we have a lot of room for having that more appetite for that. So next, Abhi. So now, from the environmental climate side, Nepal is one of the 10 most vulnerable country in terms of climate risk. Having said that, our contribution for GHG or carbon emission is less than 0.5% as per the World Bank's report. So it's irony that without making any such contribution for this negatively into the environment, we have become one of the most vulnerable country. So from the government side, from overall, there's a lot of commitment for now in this environmental and this climate related thing. So as we are heading towards becoming the middle income country by 2030 and achieving this SDGs goal, we have said that our commitment in COP26, our government's commitment was to become net zero country by 2045. And at least 15% of our total energy demand to be fulfilled by supply from renewable energy sources, including hydro, and at least maintain 45% of our country under forest cover. With that, there are many other commitments with that, and one of that is by 2030, our plan is to produce 15,000 megawatt of hydropower electricity, which can be exported to India, Bangladesh, and the South Asian region, because there's a huge demand for renewable energy for Nepal. So this is the government commitment from the government side, which is also being, that's also important for the banks like us to support direct financing for this environment and climate related risk mitigation, so that producing not only for the mitigation, for adaptation also, and we can really contribute in terms of for the overall this climate risk issues which we are seeing all over the globe in the last 5-6 years, and that this has become one of the major risks for all the banks now. So that's where we see Nepal can offer a lot of, Nepal has a lot of potential or offer a lot of opportunities for foreign investors, foreign lenders, or any other collaborations for that matter. So the government is approaching this green inclusive green approach, green resilient and inclusive development model post-COVID to cater all these development requirement, employment requirement. And there are a group of donor agencies to support this approach. And we are moving pretty much in line with the plan in this sector. And this is also, this can also offer a lot of opportunities for bankings in Nepal. So next slide, Debbie. Now, just to give you a brief overview of Nepalese banking industry, I covered about how Nepal is doing as a country. Now, Nepalese banking industry. Formally, the banking in Nepal started just 83 years back in 1937, when the first commercial bank was opened by the government of Nepal in their ownership. This bank is Nepal Bank. That's the oldest bank operating. And before that, back in 1880, there was some foundation for formal banking, just for lending purpose only. So formally, the Nepalese banking starts back in 1937. And after 20 years, almost 20 years of that, the Central Bank of Nepal was established in 1956. So they're just 60 years plus. But in real sense, after that, two more state banks were opened after that. But in real sense, the private banks started operating in Nepal in 1984, with the three joint ventures bank coming in, Greenlays, now it's Standard Chartered, or the Credit Agricole, and there's one Arab Bank. They established three different banks under this investment protect agreements. So from there, actually the real history of banking starts. And in 2004, the government promulgated this BAFIA ordinance for, this is Umbrella Act for all BFIs, banking and financial institutions. So if you look at that thing, the banking in Nepal is relatively very young industry with just a history of 40 years. And if you take the average age of these banks, then it could be around slightly over 20 years only. But despite that, we have currently about 21 A-class banks. That was 32 till 2 years back, because there are a lot of consolidations happening, mergers and acquisitions. And there are Class B, Class C banks, and there's Class D is this microfinance, including all. There are 119 banks only. Despite the fact that still we feel that in terms of size of economy, in terms of size of population, we are overcrowded here in the banking. But despite being a very young, relatively young industry, we have really performed well. We are one of the most transparent industry operating in Nepal, contributing for major tax and all these. And we have already achieved 65% of financial excess from the inclusion point of view. And we have branches in all 7 out of 750 local level government, 752. We are operating with total 11,500 branches, and only bank ABC class banks offers jobs to 53,000 people all over the country. So we are really helping the social transformation in the country in last 40 years or so, and we are considered as one of the major contributor for overall economic transformation and growth, especially in the last 10-15 years. So next slide, Abhi. So as I mentioned, for the ABC category, we have 6,437 branches. If we include microfinance, then we have about 11,500. We are operating with more than 48 million deposit accounts, where population is 29.1 million. So that means we have very good penetration in terms of banking, and we are holding about 1.8 million borrowers account, and operating with almost 5,000 ATMs, 20 million mobile banking, and PSO, PSP about 30. So this is what is excess or footprints we have to operate at this point in time. And actually we need to do a lot especially from the digitization perspective to enhance the reach and enhance the financial inclusion and financial literacy. Lots needs to be done yet, but so far, whatever we have done, this is it. So next slide, Abhi. In terms of access point or this branches per 100,000, we have the highest number of branches in terms of that. That means in terms of access or reach to the smaller customers, probably we are doing better, because in last five, if you look at from last 10 years, the numbers has really gone up because otherwise we were around 2010, we are one of the lowest, we had the lowest coverage in terms of branches and all this. But now if you look at the gradually from last 6-7 years, 2016, the number has increased and we have the highest penetration or highest coverage in terms of the branches versus the 100,000 population. Next, Abby. If you look at last 7 years number in terms of managing, we are currently managing about $38 billion worth of deposits, and at the same time around 33 billion, 34 billion of loans. If you look at the last 6 years period, our growth in deposits is at the 17% CAGR, and loan growth has been 20% of total CAGR. We almost manage the deposits. If you look at ABC, then the size of the GDP, we are managing the deposits almost to the size of the GDP, and at the same time, the loan to GDP ratio is very also on a higher side. So this is what we have done in the last 5 years when we had a relatively better political environment in the country. And this is post promulgation of this federal structure, decentralization, that offers a lot of opportunities for banking, still offers a lot of opportunities banking in Nepal. Next slide, please. So we are deploying about, to do that business, we are deploying about 5.5, almost 6 billion of capital fund, which is back in 2019, it was 3.5, now it's 5.5. We are, capitalization is really good, and reinvesting in the banking business over the last 4 or 5 years. And if you look at the NPA, this is something very interesting could be interesting for you, because during the COVID time, the NPA level were improving despite all the difficulties and lockdown and everything. But now this post-COVID and start of all these global issues, this NPA level has started creeping up, reaching about the same level back in 2019. That's a bit of concern for all of us here. This could be many reasons because of this, the current scenario globally with rising interest rate and inflation, and that has impacted the liquidity. At the same time, the demand side, to control this external issues, like to control or to have this this foreign currency reserve level at the desired level. There's so many control measures were introduced by the central bank, which has really impacted the overall demand side. And now there's some issues in terms of this NPA. But having said that, still, if you look at this number, to around slightly less than 2.5% industry average is still it's better than other players in this part of the world. At the same time, it's manageable, but there's some certain concern on this. Next slide, please. So in terms of ROE, it's hovering around 12%. It's gradually declining. Capital adequacy, we are adequately capitalized. If you look at the total tier 1, tier 2, but in terms of tier 1, there are certain issues there. In terms of spread, now central bank has capped the spread at existing cap is at 4.44%. We have to reduce that to 4% by the end of this fiscal year. That means in next 4 months we have to reduce that. So that is also impacting our ROE, but still we expect this spread overall in industry spread to hover around slightly less than 4% next year. Currently it's about 4.23. That's pretty healthy, good, but because of the cap put by the central bank, that has to be reduced, and that will impact the overall P&L. And earning per share is around 20%. If you look at the average, also it's somewhere around slightly over the 20% level for the last 4 or 5 years, which is, I think, it's a good return. And next slide, please. So now we'll talk about a bit about external commercial borrowing provisions in Nepal. As I said, like most of the current this borrowing and lending portfolio or these assets, risk assets are being funded by local liabilities or local deposits raised by the banks locally. Most of them are 50% of them comes from the retail kind of deposits, which is put by the individuals, and around 40% is from the institutional depositors. But as I said earlier, like, there's still a good room for banks or for as a country to bring in foreign currency debt or investment into the country or other types of borrowings. Central bank has gradually been liberalizing these external borrowing policies, and now banks are allowed to borrow up to 100% of total capital of the bank. So that means if you look at that number, it's almost around 5 billion, slightly less than 5 billion to the core capital level. So there are fixed rates for this. That's 1-year benchmark rates, or that's a SOFR rate plus maximum markings would be 4.5% on that, including all in cost. And the period we can borrow is for maximum up to 15 years from 6 months, and for any financial institutions or any funds we can borrow, any banks can borrow at this point in time. Those foreign currency external commercial borrowings can be used for infrastructure, energy, tourism, agriculture, SME sectors, except for this real estate and margin lending portfolio. So this could be, brought in the Haze rupee or in foreign currency, but that is open. But in rupee case, there's again a pricing cap there, like that can go, the overall rate can go above the average base rate of the banks in commercial banks in Nepal. So fixed rate products are also allowed, but that's only for 2 years period. So I think as a bank or other banks and financial institutions, there's opportunity to invest or provide debts to Nepal. Currently, most of the banks that we are dealing with DFIs, and they are providing most of these external commercial borrowing from mostly not from the commercial perspective, more from the impact perspective. So in the last 2-3 years, it's happening, and most of these DFIs are lending to Nepalese bank. But the challenge here is, as of now, as a country, we don't have our country rating, sovereign country rating, and still there's no local market for foreign currency hedging. That's where the challenge. But as of now, what we are doing is we are using like TCX and other companies to hedge our thing, or other synthetic hedgings are also being done. So the central bank is taking step on that. But going forward, if you really support to finance the growth of the banking sector and to support the overall economic growth, there could be huge room for this external commercial borrowing, especially in the hydropower sector. As I mentioned in the earlier slide, that overall we are planning to produce 15,000 megawatt of electricity in next 7-8 years time, and currently we are producing about 2,300 and another 3,000 under construction phases and production phases, and remaining the production or remaining capacity enhancement would require huge fund for Nepalese banking industry to provide the debt or in the form of equity also. So could be more than $20 billion funding gap, and the entire that cannot come from the banking industry because of certain constraints mobilizing the local funding. So there could be a lot of opportunity for that, especially in the hydropower, because now we have already started exporting this hydro produce energy to India. India is the buyer, and there could be also the possibility for Nepal to export to Bangladesh also, because we see a lot of demand there as well. So that's the area. And apart from that, tourism also holds very good opportunity for Nepal, especially because of this heritage and adventure which we can offer, and religious tourism or other social tourism, which is very much possible in Nepal. This is the opportunity we see as an opportunity. Next slide, please. Abby, next slide. So for this, central bank approval has to be taken, and this can be used in different the energy related for all these sectors that can be done. And next slide. So now after banking, why one should invest in Nepal is because we are, as I said earlier, strategically located, geostrategically located, and between two largest economy or top 5 economy in the world, with largest access to largest population, 1/3 of the population, and there is a huge demand for clean energy, which Nepal has. So that's the one major reason why one should invest in Nepal. As I said, there's an active young population, skill or semi-skill after getting exposure in different countries as a migrant routes, they are coming back. And 100% ownership can be provided here, and the minimum threshold is very low. That 20 million is not even a $150,000 only. So all very liberal policies. There are many bilateral and other agreements at the different government levels for tax and all these different facilities are there. So this is definitely a attractive destination for different people to come into Nepal, where we can see opportunities for both the sides. So next slide, Abhi. So there are the experience with the local multinationals who are operating here and other companies. Their ROE and everything is really high, I mean, to the extent of 50-60%, and there's a very easy repatriation windows. So with all these and cheap labor and very certain virgin sectors are still available there in terms of natural resources and all these. So access with India and free access to other China and all these are the key reason why Nepalese, the foreign companies operating in Nepal are doing better and producing good results. That's just what I wanted to share here. And next slide, please, Abhi. This could be the major areas where one can look into the investing in Nepal, from energy is topmost, tourism, agriculture, because there is a consumption, as I said, almost 16 billion of imports we did last year. That means there's a demand is already there in terms of thing, and the purchasing power is also increasing over the period of time. So information technology could be infrastructure, health and education. All these could be the potential area for investment into Nepal. So next slide, please. These are the way how we can do it. I just skip this slide because I am running a lot of time. So these are the process, how it works. If you can use this page slide later on if you really want to see this in more detail. Next slide, please. Repatriation process, I will say this is very simple, 3 processes. There are 2 approvals required, and that can be done. The investor, currently the investors in our bank, my bank also, they are every year repatriating their dividends without much of hassles and without much of issues. So this is also very easy process. Next, Debbie. So challenges I already mentioned, like we are facing in terms of this international global conflicts, geopolitics issues, the possible recession in the world economy, and dollar interest rate, which is rising pretty fast in the last 1 year or 8 months. The supply chain issues, climate risk at the top, and the pandemic effect still there, especially from China's point of view. These are the challenges we are facing as other countries. This domestic side financing gap is there. That could be opportunity for the other side. Infrastructures, out migration, because most of the young population are still working out in the different countries. Cybersecurity, because we are now moving in digitization, taking it to a faster pace. Assets quality, as I mentioned, bit of concern in NPA, rising operating costs because of inflation and all these, liquidity because of this high imports and all this happening over the last few years. So these are the key challenges and opportunities, challenges for from our perspective as a country or as the economy. Next. But at the same time, there are lots renewable energy, tourism, as I mentioned, digitization, still lots can be done. There's a lot of markets for green markets, and population is quite young, and a lot of opportunities, cheaper and young energy are there. So especially from this energy and tourism and this green perspective, and also on the agriculture side also, there could be a lot can be done as an economy, as a country, as an industry. So we really see this as an opportunity, areas of opportunities for Nepal. So next slide, please. At the end of my presentation, now what NBA as Nepal Bankers Association we are doing as an umbrella organization managing, we have a 21 commercial bank. We're closely working with the central bank and the government finance ministry. So these are the areas where we are focusing, and research and development, because there much can be done in terms of migrating the best practices or bringing in a lot of investment into Nepal. But for that, this groundwork needs to be done. Digitization, the area where we're looking at to bring at the entire level of the banking. AML CFT is also the area where we are really working. Financial literacy, those already said 65% loss needs to be done in terms of cybersecurity, networking, and collaborations, and advocacy for different policies and all these. These are the areas as a institution we are working. We are helping banks to grow. We are helping banks to move forward, and connecting them with the different other part of the markets also. So these are the key focus areas for NBA. Now, final slide, Avi. And we see with all this, we see the areas where we can collaborate with ABA is in terms of capacity building. Though, as I said, it's a very young industry, progressing, a lot of opportunities, but lots needs to be done in terms of, especially, let's say, when we talk about climate risk and climate financing, global environment and social ESG. We don't have much of expertise in Nepal, so we have to learn from outside. For that, we can have a kind of a tie-up, or we can have this arrangement with ABA at level for this capacity building. At the same time, for AML and compliance also, this has become one of the major issues and very important issues. And technology also for the banking. And we have embarked into the journey of the sustainable banking, values-based banking for Nepalese banks. There could be a lot of things which we can migrate from our member banks in ABA, or at the one-to-one level, or at the ABA, NBA level. We really see, we expect that cooperation from that. At the same time, this corporate governance is very, very important issue for any financial institution or banking industry. That's where we can learn or collaborate with ABA or any other banks, member banks, and to support this thing. With this, I'd like to conclude, and I take a pause here, and over to you, Dilshan.
Can you see me?
No, yeah, I can see your logo HNB there, but I didn't see you. I can't see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Sunil. That was a very comprehensive and fascinating presentation. It's amazing how, as a country, over the last 4 decades, you all have evolved from a monarchy to a multi-party democracy, now to a federal state. And what is shining through for me, I mean, some of the key takeaways for me was the resilience. I mean, amazing resilience, overcome constitutional crises, natural disasters, geopolitical pressures, the COVID pandemic, and come out strong as a young nation, looking forward with a lot more positivity in the future. The second area is really the potential for industrialization. I think, there is so much opportunity on the export side, particularly with the duty-free access I saw for China and India to be able to really drive the import substitution, assembly, manufacturing industries, and really address the balance of payments current account deficit, which is largely reliant on the remittances right now. And of course, the third area is the high banking density. So again, it calls out for lots of opportunity and potential for digitalization and finding partners, global interest investors in that area. So I think we have steadily been increasing our participants. We have now over 150 participants right now. And there are 4 questions that are there. I'm going to read out the 4 questions straight off so that you can, start preparing your answers to respond, Sunil. So the first question is from, I'm not going to mention the names in the interest of time. We have just about 15 minutes to go. I'll just quickly read out the questions and then you can start responding. The first question is, how do Nepalese banks manage governance, risk and compliance? Particularly in the recent years, there is a technological shift, advancement, given the managing the enterprise risk management focus globally. How does the Nepalese bank stack up there? Second question is, how do you address the NPA issue and the watchlisting loans? And there was a mention about one commercial bank having an NPA level of 28% of its net worth. As the Bankers Association, how do we address that? And the next question is about how technology can be leveraged to create a more sustainable banking system in Nepal. And the fourth question is the cost of compliance and the cost of funds for Nepalese banks when they borrow from international banks and other organizations. So these are the 4 questions that are presently on the chat room. Would you like to respond to them, Sunil?
Yeah, let's start from the last question. So cost of compliance and how's the cost for borrowing from the international lenders is over the period of time, the cost of compliance has been increasing as in the other parts of the world because the central bank is coming up with stricter, stringent compliance rules for AML, KYC, and other governance-related areas. And the banking industry in Nepal is one of the central bank is managing it. There's a very highly regulated kind of industry in Nepal. That's the reason in the very short span of time we have managed to perform well. So far as the cost of borrowing is concerned, if you really borrow from outside, like at the current rate, if you look at the current SOFR rate is hovering around 5% plus, then our rate is borrowing rate would be at about 8.5% with all other all-in costs. So on top of that, if you add the hedging cost, then it becomes really 11%, and so So that is for this part of the market. Actually, it's on a higher side. Basically, today's term deposit rates for 1 year is hovering around 11%. Savings rate is hovering around 8.5, 8.4 to be very precise, higher side. So inflation is somewhere around 7.26 or 7.5%. So this is the concern actually at this point in time, when really the rates are on a higher side in the globally in all across all the economy. So that's where is the challenge for us, and increasing compliance cost is also putting a lot of pressure on our bottom line at this point in time. That's one. Second, other was the technology leveraging. How can technology can leverage? Because that's where I think most of the banks are focusing, especially after COVID, when the awareness and the demand for this technology-related products are gone up. And now, if we look at the geography or the situation of the country, where in those mountain area, hilly areas, it's really difficult to enhance the access through the physical brick and mortar branches because of very high cost and because of excess and because of other infrastructure. But at the same time, we have very good mobile penetration in the country. So because of that, there's a lot of opportunity for this financial inclusion through enhancing technologies. Like we've already started smaller loans, especially in the smaller loans, retail and other type of micro SME loans. We've already started AI-based technology to provide that thing, and preparing scorecard and all these based on that. So there's a lot of opportunity on that. Actually, the future is that, because from the 65%, if you really want to move beyond that, then probably the area where we can really leverage, and we already started investing, and that's where we also need some support from ABA level also to support this journey of that. And I think that's very important. And this journey of sustainability and this supporting real economy, and now we are focusing on the areas where we can really contribute for this climate risk mitigation. As I said, like if our hydropower can really replace these all fossil fuel, which is fossil fuel related projects or industries, and provide that to the export that to India, that can really help. And for that also we need a lot of technological support in terms of bringing that, in terms of agriculture, for that adaptation, or even for this clean this kind of energy projects as well. So NBA,
if I can just backtrack for a second, Sunil, on the digital banking and the mobile banking, would you like to just say a few words in terms of how you all have progressed there? I noticed there's something like 20 million mobile banking subscribers. Yeah. That's quite good. So is that an area that is, given the fact that you have the highest banking density amongst all the banks in countries in South Asia, that should be a key priority, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, over the last few years, banks have already started investing in this digitization and creating the omni-channel, and their fintech companies are also competing on that. Banks are also providing that service, and that has become almost all payments now has become on. We can do it on a digital basis through mobile banking, and its cost is very low. And the only issue is we are really growing pretty fast over the last few years in terms of transaction volume, in terms of number of clients acquisition. But at the same time, there's a challenge of, these fraudulent transactions and awareness among these users for that. And that's also is the concern at this point in time. So we are also mindful about that. But at the same time, the pace we are working on that, all the banks in Nepal is a pretty good, and that's why the number is 20 million. If you like add internet banking, that will also provide other now QR is also very popular these days, and These small vendors, they are using like vegetable vendors. They're also using QR. Now this has become entirely a digital payment landscape over here. But at the same time, we have to invest in other technology and cyber securities and digital literacy, and all these issues are there. But there's a huge scope for us going forward to increase that inclusion there. So I think other question was NPA issues, non-performing assets. As I said, like these customers, micro SMEs customer really hit during the COVID time, because we had about more than 1 year total lockdown period, and most of the business were restricted except few low impacted business. So that time we provided a lot of refurbishments and rescheduling, restructuring opportunities for them, and they were about to, they were in the process, or they were in line with the reviving from that. But the other hit we received after that, post-COVID, this global issues has impacted the liquidity for us. That has also created a lot of problem in terms of this increasing NPA now.
Just another quick follow-up question, Sunil. On the
Yeah.
NPA, where do you see the NPAs rising most? Is it on the large corporates? Is it on the SMEs, or is it on the microfinance?
It's mostly on the SMEs and smaller accounts. Corporates are still, there are few industries which are struggling a bit, but most of the corporates are still doing well, because they have their, the prior years, I think they've really done well in terms of their performance immediately after the COVID. But now there are a bit pressure on them as well. But based on our experience, the small customers are impacted more than. So what was the first question?
The first question was about governance. How are Nepalese banks addressing risk and compliance, managing the enterprise risk management, which is a global focus now?
Well, as I said, like central bank is very active and very positively managing this governance-related issues, and it's one of the industry where it's a highly regulated industry, and they have very close supervision by the central bank to the banks. Having said that, there are a lot needs to be done in terms of corporate governance in Nepal, especially for banks, because as I said, it's a very relatively new industries, and there are lots needs to be done in that from that point of view. That's the area. That's why I put that in my last slides, that we need some support, or we can work out, because to migrate some of the best practices in terms of this managing enterprise risk and all these into the country. But we are moving in right direction. There are certain banks, we are joint ventures. There are, a lot of external intervention are being done there. And so far, we have been managing well, but there is a room for improvement, I must say that.
Sure. I think it's an overall picture in terms of managing the credit, operations, market, reputation, cyber, all these to be looked at in totality is that focus that is being driven now on the enterprise risk management perspective. Just a few more questions that have come in. One is, I'm going to read out, like I did earlier, a full set of questions again. You can actually review it by clicking on the Q&A button. The first is proliferation financing, that is financing arms, military equipment, part of NBA's focus area apart from AML CFT. That's a specific question. Second is, barring 2-3 commercial banks, the return on equity of the banks are less than 13%. How do you see the future of banks in this context? Third is a specific question. What are the foreign banks operating in Nepal now? The fourth is, how do you see the future of banks in view of average ROE less than 13%? Again, the same question about ROE. I think those are the 4 questions, Sunil.
Okay. ROE, okay, as I said, as I showed in one of my slides there, ROE is somewhere around, hovering around 11%, which was better. Let's 5 years back, it was hovering around 15 to 16%. But now the overall pressure in this spread, because of the central bank wants to regulate that, was to put the cap there. And there are certain other caps on the other side of the non-fund based income as well. So because of that, there's a pressure on that, because now over the last, if you look at the 5 years numbers in terms of capital injection, because the banks have increased the paid-up capital by fourfold 4-5 years back, and after that also it's adequately being capitalized, because the growth rate for the credit is on a higher side, like when country is growing at 4% and the banking growth is somewhere around 20%.
And also your margins are at about 4%, 4.5%. So
yeah,
it's tight. So you need to look at non-funded income, isn't it?
Income, yes, that's the area I think we need to focus going forward. That's what the bankings are doing here now. And it would be one of the finest pricing also, but at the same time, we have to expand the areas. And the other thing where we can really work upon is we have a lot of room for, as I said, for the external borrowing or foreign currency borrowing, which are not using it. Probably in the next cycle, it would be beneficial for banks in Nepal to get that and reduce your funding cost or your overall cost of fund and manage it. Yes, I think these are where we can also find the cheaper fund for this climate, environment related, funds. That's one. Other is how about the foreign banks. There's a Standard Chartered. They are operating here since last 30 years or so, slightly around, I think it's 30 years. They started in 86. That means 27, 28 years. There are other joint ventures of Indian banks like SBI Bank, India. They have their subsidiary company in Nepal. Like Punjab National Bank, they also have a joint venture here with Nepalese partners. And at the same time, NMB Bank we have a joint venture partner, one of the GFI from Dutch GFI FMO. So these are I think there's one more joint venture. Otherwise, majority out of that 21 commercial banks, majority of our local banks operating, but they have one purely international, other subsidiaries and joint ventures are operating in Nepal. So other question was regarding this dealing with arms and all related dealings. That is, if you look at my bank's policy, that's completely restricted and not allowed, except for areas where we are supporting, like, for example, we need explosion import for hydropower projects, for tunnel and all this. Those kind of exceptions are there, but generally we don't deal with these kind of activities. And I missed the other. I think I've answered.
The other question was. No, I think you covered all the questions. Just one more question that has just come up, which is what impact by the current anti-banking movement on banking in the future?
This is something very unfortunate. I would say, because after having contributed for countries in such a way that we're one of the major contributors for tax in the country. We have been really working during the COVID time. We provided about 10 billion, means about 10 billion subsidy or rebate to all these borrowers to revive these SMEs, micro SMEs. All these have done, but now situation is the NPA levels are increasing and there's a pressure on the borrowers because they have not seen this kind of situation in the past, because this is kind of global phenomena. What they are not realizing, someone is that this is not only Nepal, but it's entire economies across the world, globe is being impacted now into high interest rate, high inflation. If you look at the US, like say their mortgage rate was hovering around 2% last year. Now it's hovering around 8.5%, 9%. So if they are not comparing that, but what they are seeing is interest rate has gone up over the last period, because it's more from the fundamental issues than any other demand and supply issues.
Sunil, I can also relate to that. I think it's a phenomenon in most countries now, where people now feel that their debt needs to be frozen, and banks are always looking to see how they can restructure the debt and also support the business revival. So I think driving business revival has something that we have to do in the interest of the in the interest of the real sector. At the end of the day, if banks don't survive, the real economy is going to get impacted very significantly.
So that's what I think in the recent monetary policy review, they have been on our NBA's request, they have included this less than 20 million relaxation to them, so that would help them to do that. But this is being done by the very handful of people now, because with their interest to see that whether they can defer or this thing. So I hope we'll manage this, and we are in good contact with the central bank and the government and all this. We are getting good support from there, and we are now in the process of creating that awareness among the people, and doing some relief measures also through this dealing restructuring as well.
Yeah. So I think the time is up. We've done pretty well in terms of answering all the questions. I think it has been a very fruitful, useful discussion that we've had, and I hope ABA will continue this with other countries as well. Excellent. Thank you very much, Sunil. I think we can continue to be in touch with you on social media and continue to engage with the Nepal Bankers Association on further questions and clarifications. But I'm sure you have evoked a lot of interest from all the foreign participants as well as the banks on the Nepali economy, which is at a very interesting stage right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dilshan, and thank you, Abhi. Thank you, ABA, for this opportunity. And thank you, Anilji. He's also there, our CEO of ABA.
So thank you very much, and I'm going to sign off now.